In this video, we're focusing on how to interpret photographs. So when you see a photograph, typically they can ask you a few questions. They can ask you to label features that you see in a photograph. They can ask you to annotate a photograph. So the difference between labeling and annotating is that labeling means, for example, I see solar panels here. I link it out. I write solar panels. That's all. But annotating means that you're providing a more elaborated description of what the solar panels do. So let's say the purpose of the question is asking you, what are the environmental features of that particular photograph? You're going to link it out, say that these are solar panels, and explain what solar panels do that contribute to environmental sustainability. So these are labeling and annotation questions that require you to draw on the photograph itself. There are other kinds of questions that don't need you to draw, but basically you need to explain yourself or do a long written answer. So these questions can include describe the environmental features of the photograph or explain how environmental features shown on the photograph contributes to environmental sustainability. So for the purpose of this video, we're just focusing on the explain question. So let's think about it. If you're given a photograph like this and they ask you, explain the environmental features of buildings in the CBD of Sydney. You need to first identify what the environmental features are. So here we have one. This is about solar panels. We also see this is two. We also see vegetation on top of the building. So these are green roofs. So these are the two basic features that you see. To explain it, you need to think about solar panels. How does it reduce energy usage in the building? Solar panels actually contribute to the electricity grid of the entire building. It generates electricity using renewable energy. So when you explain it, make sure that at the end of the explanation, link it to how less energy is being used by the building or less fossil fuels are being burnt. So if part of your energy comes from the solar panels, that means that you're using less fossil fuels to burn, you're burning less, to contribute to electricity needed by the building. So as more and more solar energy is being generated, less electricity is being generated from fossil fuels, overall, you have fewer emissions. The second one on vegetation here. So vegetation helps to cool down buildings because vegetation compared to concrete heats up a lot faster, vegetated areas don't. Which means overall, your building does not need so much air conditioning to cool it down. So vegetation helps to regulate the temperatures in the buildings to keep the entire building a bit cooler. You don't need so much energy to maintain a decent temperature for you to operate. So for photograph questions like these, they ask you to explain certain things. Actually, what you need to do is to cite all these things. Number one, number two, these are photo evidence that you need to cite first in your answer. Then use the photo evidence to explain the rest, to make sure you link it back to the question. So the question is about econ, sustainability, talk about econ. Environmental sustainability, link it back to environmental sustainability. Moving on to the next question. So in this case, you see a photograph of the eco-town of Tengah in Singapore. So this is only an artist's impression, so it's not exactly what you would see in real life, but that's what was pictured when the government tried to build this town. So in this case, if you compare this photograph and the previous photograph here, you realize that the previous photograph here is a more zoomed in version. So basically, the entire photograph or the focus of the photograph are the solar panels and the green roofs already. There's no need for you to indicate, in the foreground, background, what happens, because it's clear enough that the photograph shows everything. But in the second photograph here, you see that there are many components to this photo. You see a train station, you see some shops here, probably restaurants, you see a park area, you see buildings behind. These could be offices, these could be residential areas. Okay, it's not clearly enough, indicated enough. So in this case, if you look at a very zoomed out photo and you are asked this question, explain how the design of Tengah contributes to sustainable neighborhoods or sustainable towns. There are many elements that you can talk about. So to specify the element that you're talking about, you might want to locate it exactly in the photograph. So this is where the knowledge of foreground, middle ground, and background comes in. So let's say you divide the photograph into 3 halves here. Okay, I'm just going to indicate it at the side. The foreground is below, the middle ground in the middle, and the background is behind. So ideally, this line would stretch across the entire photograph. So when you use indicators like fore, middle, or background, that helps the marker understand which part of the photograph you're talking about. And if you can locate that particular feature, then we can relate your answer a bit better, understand your answer more quickly. So in this case, remember the question is about sustainability. Just going to write it here. How do features in this town contribute to sustainability? And you've learned that there are actually 3 dimensions of sustainability. There is econ, there is environmental, and there is social. Okay, so 3 dimensions to it. So let's try to find evidence that relates to each of the dimensions. Let's look at economic sustainability first. You realize that there are a lot of residential areas here, and there are also restaurants here. So what you can do is you can talk about the middle and the background. So you can state your evidence first, or you can state your point first. So the evidence that you see in the photograph is there are a lot of residential areas, and then actually below the residential blocks you would find restaurants. And this contributes to economic sustainability because your residents can visit the restaurants very, very easily, or shops very easily, which then provides a steady source of clientele for your restaurants and shops here. And that contributes to their business. So that's thinking from the perspective of the businesses that operate in the area. So another thing is you realize there is a transport system here. So this is in the background, the MRT station. So MRT stations are the presence of transport modes near to residential areas cuts down on the amount of time and money needed to travel. So this contributes to individual economic sustainability because you're reducing your cost of travel. Let's go on to environmental sustainability. So you see the entire patch of grass below. Okay, this is in the middle and foreground here. A lot of trees in the area. So the trees in the area, as well as all these things in the background here, you see green roofs on top of your residential areas. All these help to lower the temperatures in the area, which is similar to the previous photograph. You're actually helping to regulate the temperature of buildings, the green roofs, and then in turn, you're reducing the amount of energy needed to cool down the buildings. For the park area here, where you get more vegetated areas, that actually helps to clean up the air. You're improving the air quality of the area by removing pollutants. Another thing you can mention is this. Again, you can talk about the transport. If public transport facilities or infrastructure is located so near your residential areas, that means that you're cutting down on the need to drive. And in turn, you're actually reducing carbon emissions. So you see that the same evidence can lead you in different directions, can lead you to different dimensions of sustainability as long as you know how to link it there. Then let's talk about the last one here, the social sustainability. You can bring up the idea again of the restaurants here and the shops here. You can bring up the idea of the parks in the foreground here. You see a lot of people in this area. And what does this tell you? It tells you that these are common spaces where people can gather, they can interact with other neighbors and people living in the entire community. And that helps to build emotional connections, that helps to foster a sense of belonging to the entire community.